Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai Baba. So this is going to be very relaxed, just amongst friends. I'm just going to talk about my recent trip to Rome. So, first thing people ask, almost always, the first thing people ask is, "What? You went alone? Did you go alone? Are you alone?" All variations on that subject, like, yes, I went alone. I didn't join a tour. I didn't do any of those things. I really wanted to go alone. And I wanted to make up my agenda as I went. I did basically before I went, I tuned in to some of the things that were definites, and I got some entrance tickets in advance, but I kept my schedule very loose to see what I would want to do, and I kept it loose because I thought that Baba would inspire me. And you know what? The whole thing was very Baba without being a Baba trip. It wasn't specifically to be with Baba lovers or to see Baba sites or to feel Baba or any of that sort of obvious Baba. But before I went, I had this thought some months ago that for my birthday this year, I wanted to do something completely different, right? And then I started thinking, well, I could take a trip. Then I thought, where do I want to go? And I let a couple of things surface, just sort of like, okay, if if I were at some point able to do everything on my bucket list, where would I go? And there's so many places, right? So all my life, well, when I was a kid, I traveled a lot. My parents dragged me all over the world multiple times. I'll tell you more about that sometime. Um, I felt like on some level I was fine with never traveling ever again. But I started thinking this year, you know what? It's so different to travel on your own agenda, as an adult, as someone who is generating the thought process for themselves. So I was like, you know what? If I never get to everything on my bucket list, but I at least start, well, that's way more fun than just sort of like passively waiting for life to pass you by and then being like, oh, well, didn't get to everything. I'd rather try or at least start. And so that's what I did this year. I just sort of put it out there. I did a Google search for airfare to a few different places, and you know how you can save a search, and I saved it, and for a few weeks it was just like I don't know where I'm going. I just gonna let it percolate and let Baba tell me. And one of the conversations that Bob and I have with airfare is I kind of watch the price and I'm like, okay, if it drops really low, then that's where I'm going. And Baba, of course, is handling that, right? So I tell Baba, like, whatever price fare seems like the most reasonable, that's where I'm going. And then I let him, within a range of dates, I tell him, okay, you pick the length and we'll figure it out from there. And so I had on the list a few places like, Singapore, Rome, and I forget what the third one was. Oh, yeah. I even put on the list Nairobi. Let's see what happens if I try to go to Kenya. And the prices were pretty high. And then suddenly there was a little drop for Rome. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And I don't know what it is, but when I was a kid, France was the exotic destination. You know what I mean? Everyone learned French or went to France, or Paris was everything. I don't know what it is, but lately, like the past 4, 5, 7 years, whatever it is, it's been Italy. You know what I mean? Everyone's going to Italy. All the Bobblers went to Assisi over the course of 3, 4 years, and I've seen so many pictures from Italy. So this summer, the price fare went down, right? And I see all these posts, and everybody in the culture seems to be talking about Italy. I'm like, I don't know what it is, but Baba's definitely putting focus on Rome and Italy and various parts of Italy. So I thought, well, all right, let's do it. And I thought to myself, so if I go to Rome, what would I want to do? And I really couldn't quite picture exactly what I would be doing in advance. So I thought, well, I'll just make it light. I'll make my agenda light. I'll do like four or five things from afar. I set up a few things in advance, and then I'll just see when I get there what I want to do. Well, turns out I got real busy. I thought I'd be like, because big cities, there's always a park or a place to hang out or sit in a cafe. My goodness, there was so much to do in Rome that was extremely motivating. So, anyway, that's to set the scene, and I thought that I could just share some of the photos that I took. My first day was kind of like just sort of orienting, getting a lay of the land, walking around the immediate neighborhood, seeing where the bus stop is, and seeing how far it is to walk, how difficult would it be to take public transportation, right? And right there on the corner was this, it was a little corner stall that had like leather belts and leather purses and that sort of thing, like very sort of like touristy things, but made in Italy. And there was a friend that had asked for a belt, so boom, right off the bat, took care of that to-do list, and I got myself a little purse and like got him a belt, and I had the guy cut it to the right size. When I came back, it was exactly the right size. It was just like everything was just like so bobbiful, so easy, like for sure, just take that, no problem, just like everything was just sort of like in his flow, you know what I mean? So I was wandering, and this is actually a picture from near the tram stop, and this is a minister of something like education or something. It was like just right there, and it's just this gorgeous building, and I just think to myself, that's incredible, you know what I mean? You're like going to work in this building that looks like that. So cool. So that's a picture of the entrance. How amazing are these old buildings, you know what I mean? And they're just right, left, and center. Here's a picture on the walk, and like this crumbling wall in the middle of a newer building, and like they put this street number in it, you know what I mean? Like it's just like, and people live there, like the motorcycles and whatever. So that's all from the first day, just walking around, trying to stay awake. When you have a big time zone change, the best thing to do is try to immediately get on the new time zone as much as you can. Try to sleep through the night, so get tired enough that you sleep, and then you wake up when it's light, and you're pretty much on the new time zone from then. So this is just more pictures from walking around the neighborhood. And of course, my first day, I'm just like agog with like all these old buildings. It's just like, nothing to it. Here's a little fountain. Here's a little monument. It's just like, just right here. So I didn't go to Rome with a lot of preconceptions. I didn't have like, a lot that I read up on that I needed to do, or that I'd learned a lot about the history. I was going pretty much waiting to see what happened. So the very next day, so I had a situation where I had bought tickets to the Vatican museums and the Sistine Chapel, and they call them skip the line tickets. So you buy them online, they're at a premium versus going right up to the ticket counter, but the ticket counter requires a lot of waiting in the hot sun. Oh, it was so hot. So hot. And funnily enough, the first thing I did was get a VRBO when I booked the tickets. So the landlord, the VRBO host, first thing was saying, "Oh, you Americans, you like air conditioning. We don't believe in it. We just leave the windows open, but we have air conditioning for you Americans, So he was explaining to me how they would just keep the windows open. And they have this attitude about air conditioning that's like, I guess it's a common European thing to be like, air conditioning is like, bad for you. So, oh my goodness. So even in grand buildings like museums and like, big public buildings, galleries, whatever, The air conditioning's really spotty. Marjolaine, you unmuted. You have something to say?
Yeah, well, I was thinking because there were like 2,000 people dying from the heat wave in
Yeah.
Belgium alone and in Paris, and so I think I had learned somewhere. Somebody teach me that also in the genes, like in the generational DNA or something like that,
Yeah.
you withstand the heat more. So I was really curious whether Americans would be more adapted to the heat in Europe, but
Well,
apparently,
when you say Americans, it's a very big country. When I
yeah.
was from New York, we didn't have that much air conditioning, and in the summer it was sweltering, but only for a day or two. Here in Myrtle Beach, I don't think you can really live year round. I mean, they did at some point. There were people who lived year round in Myrtle Beach, but the humidity is so bad
Mm.
that the same temperature degrees, same 83 or 90 degrees, feels insanely different in Myrtle Beach
Yeah.
versus. And the mold problem because of the humidity. And I was asking someone whose family is generationally from here, and she said, "Oh, every building had like ventilation and you put fans on." It's like, well, what about mold? I think they basically lived with it much more than we do now, and we probably know more about it now. I wouldn't recommend living in Myrtle Beach without air conditioning. It's not safe.
Mm.
Anyway, this is the Vatican Museums, and this was the original entrance, but now they make it the exit, and they've built a new entrance. Anyway, look how beautiful, you know what I mean? So up on top, I did do a tour guide thing that day. Oh, I was telling you about how I bought these tickets, and it was going to be kind of later in the week. And just before I left, literally the day I'm leaving, there was an email saying, we canceled it. And the reason they canceled it was that I don't remember them saying a reason. Anyway, they canceled it. I'm like, oh, okay. So I scrambled and I was able to get another entrance ticket. You pay a little bit extra, shall I say, a little. And this was with a tour guide. It was an audio tour. Like the person walks you through, and you've got these little earpieces, so you can hear them. And so that ended up being the first day of my trip. It's going to be like the fourth or whatever. But Baba worked it out. I think it was really good that he set it up that this was the first day, because there's something about this trip that was so neatly divided. So one of the things I found was that it was an insane amount of art. So this is not a lot of people know this. This is the tour guide told us about it, and then later I read about it. This is a torso that was ancient. I think it was Greek or maybe before Greek. I can't remember, but it was found damaged like this. But Michelangelo and other artists found it so inspiring because the torso shows so much energy, so that even if it's incomplete, you can see a real person in the stone, full of life and vigor. So, anyway, as an art historian, that's of interest. So, at first, there's our tour guide with the flag, and I started taking all these pictures just to like sear it in my mind, because everything was going by so fast. It was like, this is happening and that's happening. This building's gorgeous and and she's telling us this and and I just started taking all these pictures because I'm like, one day I'm going to go back and review all these when I have more time. So this is in that courtyard of the Vatican Museums. So the interesting thing with the Vatican Museums, the tour guide mentioned, was that this is basically housing all the gifts that the popes over time have received. And it made so much sense. Like, oh, that's why they have so many treasures. Like who wouldn't want to, if you truly think of the pope as God's emissary on earth, then yeah, you would give him all your precious items. This was an interesting sculpture in brass, pretty ancient. I don't remember when. This is a gigantic bath, basically Nero's bath, made out of porphyry, which is a kind of stone, and it's like super heavy, and it's all one piece, which makes it like $1 billion worth, something like that, or something ridiculous. And I just started, when I could, just taking pictures. I don't even know all the story behind every single piece because you're going through like the whole tour was 2 hours, and there's like 10,000 pieces to look at. I mean, it's ridiculous how much they have. Just right, left, and center, like above you, below you, around you, the floor, everything is just amazing. And so I started taking these pictures thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to want to see this later, and look at this piece, I could look at this for an hour, you know what I mean? Look at the way, I don't know if you can see, look at the way the flesh yields to the shoulder here, you know what I mean? Like the stone is so alive. So I started taking all these pictures. And then that night, I was like, well, I'm going to want to be able to find these again one day. So I posted to Facebook, and then it started being like, well, I'll just post to Facebook every night. And it was fun because it felt like I was kind of like a travel guide. I was kind of like posting and people could follow my trip, which was really fun. It made it feel like I was less alone, and I didn't feel lonely, but it was definitely fun to share. So, interesting a thing about tapestries, there was a lot more of a gold color to them when they were first made. The gold would fade over time. It's one of the reasons tapestries have to be kept in the dark. But they were very, 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 very expensive to make. And so it was a mark of wealth to have them. And of course, the bigger they are, gosh, And then on top of that, they would, rich people would hire famous artists to do what they call a cartoon, to kind of draw the painting itself, so to speak, and then the tapestry artist would put that to tapestry. And a lot of these rooms being big and open, the tapestries help insulate the walls. So it was a mark of wealth to have them, but it was also a practical thing. And every freaking ceiling was just unbelievable. I mean, that first day, I was just blown away. I was so blown away by the amount of visual stimulus everywhere. The floor, the ceiling, the walls, the little frescoes on the around windows. It's like I say, one of the reasons I was taking so many pictures. It's like I could stare at this for like a couple hours. Look at all the different. And meantime, you're on a tour, you're walking, So I was like, I'll take a picture. I'll look at this later, So I'm glad to be doing this little sharing tour. Some very famous pieces are in the gallery. I honestly can't remember everything about this piece, but the tour guide's like, oh, this is a famous artist, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, So every wall was just something amazing to look at. I forget, this whole room is about one story, and I forget all the details now, you know what I mean? Like, it's just so overwhelming, but just visually, look at this. Yeah, I mean, I'm not doing a very good job of presenting because I can't even remember what the paintings were about, but just look at it visually. This is obviously a battle, and all the different angels participating in the story, you know what I mean? Just on. I'm sure that an art historian would laugh at me and be like, oh, but I can't remember. I was told, and it's already gone. So there's all of these small collections too. So they have like gigantic pieces, but they also have like little cases where they show little dioramas of smaller collections. This is all like little ceramic pieces, I think, and a little collection of like, chalices and that sort of thing. So like it was a whole crazy collection of every kind of thing. So this is a famous staircase. It's actually two winding staircases that go down. Every part of it completely ornate, just gorgeous. So when you exit, they allow you to go out this way. So I think this used to be the entrance. And maybe it was both entrance and exit because there's two stairways, two ramps. So just right, left, and center. Just gorgeous statues. This is Greek, I think. And then there's, I think, something Ethiopian on the left. So after the tour guide left us, I was able to wander back in because I'd already entered, and I took some more pictures. Oh, and in the Sistine, they didn't allow photographs. There were people taking photographs right, left, etc. But in the Sistine Chapel, supposedly, we were supposed to keep silent and we were supposed to not take pictures. Nobody was paying any mind, but I kept silent and I didn't take pictures. So that's why you don't see pictures of the Sistine here. But look at this sculpture. And I just had this realization how much that area of the world had really, really mastered stone sculpture, from ancient times. Like we think of Michelangelo, we think of sort of the Renaissance artists, but they're basing their work on something much older and such a long tradition. And look at the way the fabric falls, and I was just stunned, because it's like voluminous. I mean, talk about voluminous, you know what I mean? This is where it comes from. I had this whole revelation that going to a museum in New York is nothing like going to a museum where it comes from, It's kind of like the fount of productivity, and it's so different than seeing one of these pieces on a pedestal in New York. This is like, we just make this stuff here, That's what it felt like, So I'm taking this picture for the architecture as much as this mass of ancient statuary. This is all antiquity. This is an antiquity section, so Greek or earlier Roman Empire times. This is probably Roman. Yeah, so then there's this fancy hall where they have the nicer stuff. When you make a right turn, it's like, holy mackerel. So on the tour, they didn't even cover this stuff. They were just like walking, and they skipped the antiquities part, and this is like, dang, this is gorgeous. So this room was one of a newer wing and had been funded by some rich donors. And look, I specifically had a person in this picture so you can see the scale of this gigantic statue. And look at the Adam's apple. You know what I mean? Like, how cool. They were so observant. So this is back to the courtyard, and just kind of showing the famous pine cone. So the pine cone has something to do with oh yeah, okay, so this is a panoramic. Has something to do with the symbol of Rome. So later that afternoon, I visited St. Peter's Basilica. So that day I did two major things, and that was my very first full day in Rome. So yeah, did a lot that first day. So in St. Peter's Square, if that's what they call it, I forget exactly if that's what they call it, there's this place to stand. So these two sets of colonnades are actually 3 columns deep, and they are just to kind of set the grandeur of this square in front of St. Peter's. So what's interesting is that there's this spot on the ground that's marked with a metal circle. And if you stand right there, all the columns line up exactly. And there's a spot for this side, and then there's a different spot for the other side. So when you go all the way around this monument and stand on the other side, there's a metal, it's kind of like this circle, but it's metal, and you stand on the other side, and those columns all line up. So I was just taking a picture of that. I had found out about that on Facebook. So there's all these people who do these sort of like tips for Rome and things to look at in Rome and all this stuff. And I started perusing those, and I'd learned a lot that way about what to do in Rome. This is entering St. Peter's. So this is just the foyer, so to speak. You walk in, there's these humongous doors, and you walk in, and this is just the foyer. This is like the sort of entrance. And just look at that ceiling, you know? And that's not even entering yet. There's just the other side of it. And on this picture, the entrance is to the right, you know? So this is when you first walk in, this is the view you get, is just how grand and how gold and how ornate St. Peter's Basilica is. Various statuary, just gorgeous. Just gorgeous. So this is my very first full day, and this is what I'm seeing, and I'm just blown away. And I think I was tired on my feet, but I think I spent 2 hours just looking at every freaking thing in St. Peter's Basilica, because it was so gorgeous. I mean, between you and me, it's not my taste to walk into a spiritual space and be so overwhelmed, you know? But from a visual artist point of view, this is just like stunning. Every direction was just visually stimulating. And of course, you have to admire the dedication. There's some awe around the level of devotion to create artwork of this intricacy to honor God and the saints. And but look at the fabric, you know what I mean? Just in terms of accomplishment and craftsmanship and artistry. So this isn't even the main dome, if I remember right. This is just a side dome. And the Pietà. So the Pietà, when you enter, is immediately to the right, but I'd walked right in. And then I went back and looked at, there's like this little online guide to the Basilica that I went back and checked, and I was like, oops, missed the Pietà. Had to go back. Michelangelo's Pietà, I mean, just stunning. And it's just there in the middle of all this other stuff. It's like, if this were in New York, it would be like, you know, the whole room is just like empty and this is the only thing in it. You know what I mean? Because it would be that important. And here it's like, well, it's just one of the, yeah, very important, yeah. But they have so much artistry that this is just like, yeah, it's just another chapel off the wing of the main sanctuary. Just right, left, and center. Just gorgeousness, you know? Visual intensity. This is just in the floor. This is one of the, I don't know if it's a vent cover or, I couldn't help taking a picture of it. Look at this doorway, you know what I mean? One of the popes, I forget who this was, maybe Pope Innocent? Pope Urban? I don't remember. Anyway, he's chasing away death, I guess. That's what I read in this, but look at the amazing artistry and the use of different stones and the drapes and the textures and the humanness of these figures and the size, the scale, you know? Yeah. And like I say, this is my first real day in Rome, and I'm just like, what? So then underneath the basilica is, what did they call it? Anyway, it's where popes were buried. Not all the popes are there, but they could choose to be buried under the basilica, and so a lot of them would have a statue made. I liked the devotional imagery. Most of the popes. Oh, and then while I was there, some tour guys walking by and says, "Oh, we're very lucky. There's a wedding," and so there are people who can get married at St. Peter's, and this is a lucky bride. So I did go up to the top of the dome, which is there's a separate entrance ticket for that, and I paid for the lift because apparently even when you take the lift, there was more steps, so I paid for that. And there were a lot of steps to get to the top. So this is not fully the top, but even from there, the views were just gorgeous. Look at these gorgeous gardens, you know. And I didn't even know what I was looking at, and I still can't say I know, but I was just like, take a picture, darn, you know, just gorgeous. This is at the top. There's a dome that we couldn't walk into, but look how pretty. And the Swiss Guard. And this is walking back to the, that's dinner. I think I had maybe taken a couple more pictures of the top of the dome. Anyway, let's see. So let's go to day 3. Sorry, I have to scroll down, down, down. Scroll down, down, down. Yeah, anybody want to say something? There's so much to see. It was ridiculous. All right, so day 3, what did I do? I went to the Palazzo Barberini. I think it's a typo, Barberini. And then I went into a church, and then I happened upon the baths of Diocletian. So, this is walking around. And you see this name, Caput Mundi, everywhere, and I think that's, I need to look it up, but I think that's the city doing renovations. So this is Plaza Venezia, and I was going to this gallery. So the Barberinis were a big family that had gotten someone into the position of pope, and the popes of that day were also they were spiritual leaders, but they were also temporal leaders. The church owned properties that the Pope would then skim for his personal benefit and benefit his family. So his personal palace became a gallery later. And these are just items in the gallery. Some of it is the Pope's personal collection, and some of it is added to over time, but that's the Pope Clemens the 10th. Yeah, and just various items in his collection, and like I say, added to. I don't remember which was which, but just the collection is insane, but look at the building. Insanely high ceilings. And look at this chandelier, you know? And notice the open windows on a 90-degree day. Yeah, hot. This is ancient. I don't remember anything specific about it. I didn't take a tour, but I did spend something like an hour and a half just looking at everything. And even then, I was like, well, take a picture of this. I'm going to want to look at it again, you know? I don't even remember who all painted what now. This was a personal palace of a pope. I mean, like, look at the architecture, you know? So this is a side hallway, and this is probably like the main hallway to get to different rooms back in the day. Just gorgeous. So this piece wasn't very tall, but they often would make a smaller rendition of a statue to get an idea of what they wanted it to look like and do, and then they would make the big life-size version. And this was a small version of the famous Henry VIII painting that is much bigger and is in England. Anyway, Holbein. I'm completely blanking on the full name, but I didn't take pictures of every painting because I would have been like, you know, just taking the pictures themselves would have taken 3 hours. So I did buy a book where, you know, they spend the effort to do every painting correctly. So part of the architecture is incredible. The original palace for the Pope, Clemens, he made it a competition between two architects. I didn't realize it till later. So when you walk into the front entrance, to the left is this staircase and to the right is a square staircase, and he had two different architects build them as a kind of competition. So then I had been recommended to visit. There's this Bernini sculpture that I was highly recommended to visit, and on the way to the church, this is just across the street from it, this just gorgeous fountain. I mean, just insane. It's just over the top. And that's the church. And I think it's got Borghese in Latin. Borghese was one of the pope families. And that's the church. Just over the top. Look at all these different stones. And so this is my second full day in Rome. So I'm still getting a lay of the land. And I walk into this church and I'm blown away. Well, let me tell you, you turn around in Rome and there's another church, right? But every church is gorgeous, just over the top. So there's about 1,000 churches in Rome. And if in the States you had 1,000 churches, they'd all be different denominations. These are all Catholic churches. Like, there's only Catholic churches in Rome. You know what I mean? But each one has a little bit of a different focus, I guess. And so they built another church. And each church has a similar setup where there's the main room and then there's these chapels off the side. And all of them, every bit of them, is decorated to the hilt. So that's the front altar, just gorgeous. And there's the Bernini. No, that's not it. That's not it, but gorgeous nevertheless. I think it took me a minute to find, but it's right at the front. But look at this. This is just a gate. This is a little gate to open to go into a chapel. Just gorgeous. There it is. This is the ecstasy of Saint Teresa. and they have this little window that shines light, natural daylight down. So it's just naturally lit like that. So clever. And just everywhere you look, it's just visually enticing. This is the baby Jesus. Il bambino Gesù. Bambino. So it was the first time in that trip that I saw that imagery, and I thought, oh my gosh, the baby Jesus is a big deal in Prague, Oklahoma, because the Czechs had brought the baby Jesus there, which they thought was miraculous. There's a reason this looks yellowish. There's this netting which keeps birds out, but I took a picture anyway because just how gorgeous is that?
We have a question here from Venice
Yeah,
Beach, California,
yeah.
calling in.
Calling in from Venice Beach.
My better half wants to ask if you had in your worldwide travels with your folks, when you were a kid, did you go to Rome?
Yeah, yeah.
Did you remember anything?
So the trip I went on with my parents, so I don't remember any of the details of why. But for whatever reason, we were doing a little bit of a European stop, and I was a teenager. I think I was a young teenager, like, 13-ish, maybe 15. And the idea was we were going to do Rome in 2 days or whatever and go to Florence and, the touristy thing. And so on some level, I do think that this was a kind of finishing off of a certain kind of karma, um, closing off a loop in my family. So that trip, of course, we're doing the Colosseum. So that's my memory, is that we were in the hotel overnight. My mom had this idea that the hotel safe was not going to be trustworthy. And she put everything into her shoulder bag, red shoulder bag. I remember it vividly. And it was passports. It was at that time traveler's checks, countersigned, you know what I mean? Cash, everything. So she put it over her shoulder. We're walking along in the Colosseum. As usual, my dad is racing on ahead and my mom doesn't want to rush. This is just very typical of their pattern. So I'm kind of just slightly behind my mom and gawking because the Colosseum is gorgeous. And for whatever reason at that time, there were cars allowed right next to pedestrians. And this car, it was like a little van, if I remember right. This van drives right up to my mom, right next to my mom. A hand reaches out, grabs that shoulder bag, and drives off. And the rest of our trip that year was following Dad around to go to the UN and get another laissez-passer. And I don't know how he got more money wired. And of course, the rest of the Italy trip was gone. All I remember is going into various bureaucratic offices. So I think on some level, revisiting Rome was a kind of closing of a loop in our family karma. And needless to say, I carried all my personal things in a neck pouch under my clothes. And I had my phone on a tether. And I used Google Pay to pay for everything, so I wasn't rustling with money. Nobody saw where my money was. And I had read on Facebook that it's a law in Italy that you had to carry your passport. They could stop you. So I was like, well, that's the case. I put it in my neck pouch.
Is that true?
I'm not sure, but there were a couple of people who said they were stopped. So I did that. I put my passport underneath all my clothes, and when anybody came close, hug myself. You know what I mean? I was not going to relive my mom's experience. And I had a good time because nobody
Picture of our passport.
nobody saw me as a target. So, in terms of the photographs,
You said that as you were tossing this brown thing.
this is ruins of these ancient Roman baths that they later built a church into, and it's one of the reasons the Romans got saved. A lot of what happened in Rome was that there was all these ancient ruins, and then the whole city kind of went through a switch to Christianity, right? So they, of course, had been persecuted by the Romans, by the Roman Empire, so they didn't particularly care for Roman antiquities, and so they just built on top of or let things go to ruin or salvaged different building materials. So a lot of this was covered in marble, but all that marble's gone because they salvaged it to put in other buildings. And then some of them would get Christianized, so to speak, by being built into or around. So this particular bath was gigantic. It was humongous, and I had thought it was on my list somewhere, and I ended up taking a bus that stopped right by it, and I was like, oh, that's where it is. So I got out and I bought myself an entrance ticket, and I went in, and it's insane, the scale of this. So this whole entry was kind of built up again post antiquities, right? But that's original structure. They added windows, of course. There's a little museum to house the original ruins, and then this on the right is a newer building, of course. But they built inside the bath, where the bath used to be, they built an entire cloister. And I forget, some famous architect built it, and now I'm trying to think if it was Michelangelo. I think it was Michelangelo's plan. They built this gorgeous cloister. It's four-sided within the ruins of the bath. That's how big the bath was. So one of the things that happened was, well, you know how Romans were really into baths. They had to import the water because Rome didn't have enough water for a bath this big. They imported millions of gallons of water from the mountains through aqueducts. And then they would have to heat up that water with firewood, and Rome doesn't have gigantic forests. They had to import the wood from North Africa. I mean, the scale of the. Anyway, this is inside the museum part. And I was just remarking on, look at how it's not even whole, but you can see so much life and the folds of fabric. And so this is just getting an idea of what the scale of this place is. This is like built up as a second floor, but like this whole thing was that huge. And you look down, and this is into one of their bathrooms, and the rest of the museum as you walk around. So all around the cloisters, they had these statues on display all the way around the four walls. Oh, and this is into the actual bath part, and you get a sense of the scale. They imported these buildings. These were tomb structures that they brought from somewhere else and kind of stuck here as a place to display. But this whole thing would have been empty, and then there was this little building. I don't remember exactly the purpose of it, but there was like within this large structure, and there's a little bit of a bath, the thermal baths. They would bring the water in because Rome didn't have springs. They had the Tiber River, but that wasn't enough. They brought water in by the gazillion of tons. And this is an idea of how big the place was. It was humongous. And they'd have to heat the water using firewood. Just insane. And so they couldn't keep that up over time. I forget what this is called, but this is out by the plaza. And this is not the Colosseum. This is a theater that was built in a similar style. And that's the beginning of it. Okay. So that was day 3. That was my second full
Angela,
day. Yeah.
Angela, can I ask you, anywhere were there drawings that showed what it looked like when it was a bath, when there was water there?
I didn't see a picture like that, but I'm sure that
Yeah,
we could find it.
that's okay.
Okay. So then my third full day. So now I'm starting to be like, okay, I'm getting a sense of the scale of the problem of Rome. The problem of Rome is that it's huge and there's so much to see. And there's just right, left, and center. There's churches and monuments and fountains, and it's just insane. I did have on my list to see this flea market, which is apparently long-standing, and I thought it might be touristy, but I wanted to see. And then I went to the Palazzo Borghese that afternoon, and then I went into the Basilica de Santa Cecilia. Cecilia? Yeah, I think that's right. First thing first, right? Got to start with a pastry. There was, right in front of my VRBO, there was this French bakery, a French-inspired, Italian, of course. But their take on French pastry is Italian. But, oh my God, just right outside the door. So, got to stop in every day. This was kind of fun because I found this vendor of Chinese objects and brushes, but it was just lots of things to look at. That was also from the pastry. Little sandwiches. One of the fun things I found was that they cut the bread not in half sideways, but on a slash. I like that because it stands up and it looks very presentable. Very nice. So this is the Palazzo Borghese. Borghese was another dynasty, so to speak. So they had made a pope and they siphoned off funds, the kind of wealth. They had no problem displaying their wealth. It was kind of like how they expressed their power. So everything was built to impress, and goodness gracious, look at all that. That's just the architecture. And then you look at the individual art pieces. It's just, oh God, it's insane. I was blown away. So this is a famous statue. I think it's a Bernini. I could be wrong. Anyway, one of the things that it's showing is, it's not a happy story. It's the rape of, I forget her name, Vesuvius. But look at the way that the fingers press into the flesh. Just the artistry. And look at the way even these fingers press in, you know? So, story is not the best, but the artistry is incredible. Of course, it's a dramatic moment, right? And it's one of those tales. Look at the way the life of it, you know? The flesh, the fabric, the composition, the use of stone, the way that the face expresses so much. I don't really remember the whole story of this one, but it has to do with, I don't even remember, but look at the way the flesh folds. Look at the veins popping out. showing an older individual, the wrinkles of the skin. Just insane, the level of realism in marble. I mean, one of the hardest stones around. So one of the tour guides the first day was talking about how a lot of, so like I said, I didn't take pictures of every painting because it's hard to get the lighting, you know, but one of the things I was discovering was repeated motifs, how certain artists were copying previous artists and using that imagery in their interpretation. It's like, after this, I was starting to be like, wow, I'm taking an art history class by just looking at the real paintings, you know? I wasn't looking at a textbook and having somebody tell me, but you start seeing a pattern and you start realizing, I'm getting schooled here just by going and looking. This is an imagery that shows up. More antiquities. So this is only my third full day in Rome, and I'm just like blown away. Look at the floor. So this was kind of brought in from somewhere. I forget how that worked out, but they just brought it in and put it somewhere new because they could. But like, you know what I mean? They specifically built this for display. It later became a public museum, but this was how it was built. Look at how all these statues are built in. This was how it was built. This whole place was just, it made me think that American barons of commerce were nothing compared to what you could find in Europe. The kind of wealth and the kind of extravagant display. This happens to be, I think it was a Rodin. There was a little temporary exhibit within the larger exhibit. This is one of their older pieces, but look how they use the different color stone. I just love that. So lifelike. I just couldn't help taking pictures. It was just like so gorgeous. And I thought, well, one day I'm going to want to stare at these pictures, you know? So I'm glad to be showing it to you now. Well, the trip is still fresh. And look how much information I've already lost in a couple of days. So, yeah, it's amazing. Obviously, each piece has a story and a drama to it, and a reason it was commissioned and all that, but I have lost a lot of that information. So just even looking at that ceiling, I mean, every freaking room. And this was built as a private palace for a Borghese Pope, who then passed it on to a quote-unquote nephew. Some of the nephews were not nephews, but illegitimate children, you know? Yeah. The whole story of popes and how they personally benefit in themselves. This was amazing because her arms turn into a tree. This is the story of Daphne, if I remember right. She gets turned into a tree. A weeping willow or something? Anyway, I don't remember the whole story. This one I didn't even get the story, but look at how just hanging out these boys are. And this was, I think it was a baptism. That's why he has his hand reaching out. Yeah, like I said, I didn't take pictures of all the paintings. And you look out the window and boom, this incredible formal garden is out there. I didn't go out there to explore because it was hot, hot, hot. Even being inside was hot because some of the rooms had some mini splits air conditioning it, and some of them had actual air conditioning, and some of them had only an open window. So even in a big museum kind of space, you couldn't count on air conditioning. It was definitely hot, hot, hot. This was behind glass. That's why the shininess. But this was probably, if I remember right, this was a small scale that they later did a full scale of. Look at the detail, you know? Look how lifelike. I forget which pope, but I think that's the Borghese Pope. Hades. Not Hades. I think this was also a newer, like a newer addition to the collections. But even in the background, right? Every painting is just gorgeous. And that's in the wall, you know, that's in the wall. Yeah. Just on and on. You can't stop looking because everywhere you look, it's like, wait, there's something else to look at. And the colors in this room, pretty dramatic. I'm just taking this with a smartphone. I just wanted to show how thick the book was. That's how many things they have in their collection. That was a heavy book. I think that one I didn't buy, but I didn't want to check in any baggage. I'd bought an economy flight, and to check in a bag would have been $75. No, thank you. So there's this gigantic estate that the Borghese family had purchased over time, and it turned into a public garden. But throughout the gardens, just open to the public, are these incredible statues. And they built a man-made lake on the grounds later, English style. And so this is all water that's like, you know, brought in by an aqueduct, you know. And there's this little island they built in the middle of it. And I'm seeing the back of this statue, but you have to be on a boat to see the front. And I didn't want to rent a boat for whatever it was, 50 euros or something. He was like, no, that's okay. So this is not for the graffiti. This is to show the wall. So I was coming back, and I had heard of this basilica nearby. So this is the this is on the way to the Santa Cecilia. Cecilia, I think it's Cecilia. Santa Cecilia. There happened to be a wedding finishing up, but I took some pictures, and I'm forgetting all the details, but Santa Cecilia was a martyr, and she had been buried in the catacombs, and that's a whole story about the catacombs. But look how gorgeous this is. Anyway, so she had been buried, and later they moved her because everyone was getting moved, and they found that her body was preserved intact in a certain position. And the position was, she was laying on her side, and she had her fingers like one for the one God, and three for the you know, the Holy Trinity. And she was laying on her side, peaceful, with a cut in her neck. And they had to move her again later. And when they moved her again, her body was exactly preserved, and they made a statue of her. I wasn't allowed to take a picture of that, but This is Santa Cecilia's home, which was across the Tiber from Rome itself. So I was staying very much in this neighborhood, and so I had to check it out. And look how gorgeous it is. So this was built up over time on top of her original house. Naturally, this was not what her house looked like at the time. Yeah. Just gorgeous, though. Look at that. You know what I mean? Visually, just insane. Look at all the different stone. Like, I can't even, my eyes just can't stop looking. It's just, look at all these stones. Just gorgeous. Yeah, this is why I took so many pictures. And then I thought to share them because why not? And then I got to have a bit of a following. People were actually enjoying the day-to-day. So like I said, there was a wedding that had finished up and I went in anyway and they didn't stop me. So these are folks who are working the wedding. Always fun to look at the pipe organ. And this is on the way back. There's another church. I'm like, oh well, it was closed. And a third one. Because, you know, you can't have too many churches. This underneath there is a fish. Just wanted to take a picture of my dinner that night. And that's back to the beginning. So that was day 4, if I remember right. Let me scroll down, down, down. How we doing? People still here? Did I get rid of you? Too much to look at, right?
Amazing.
It is amazing. Okay. Day 5. Here we go. Day 5. So, I'm starting to realize, geez, there's so much to do. And so that day, I thought to go to Capitoline Hill. So there's a museum up there. There's a church, a very old church, and there's these long steps to get up to it. That's the Santa Maria in Arancelli. Yeah. And then, so the Vittoriano as well. So this is all on Capitoline Hill. So Capitoline Hill is one of the 7 hills of Rome, and it's very much in the city center. And that's taking a look at the museum. So one of the things that's interesting about this museum, it was created specifically to be a museum in like 1496 or something, whatever it is, 1400s. And a pope had decided to display some collections there. So it had been a public museum ever since then, which is pretty cool. So this is to the right of the famous steps. There's this whole garden kind of complex, and this is at the top of it, top of the hill. Made it to the top. Hot, hot, hot day. Every day was hot though. And I just wanted to show this cool architecture, you know. And then the next building over has this cool walkway. So you walk in, immediately these incredible antiquities. Look at this incredible doorway. And look at the room beyond. And look at this hallway. Just insane. Just over the top. These are frescoes. And then look at this ceiling. And more frescoes. And more frescoes. And more frescoes. And more frescoes. And then look at the floor, you know. Look at these walls. All of that was frescoed in. And then there's this gorgeous statue at the end. I think it's a pope, but yeah, that's the pope. I forget which pope. Pontifici Optimo. I think that's his name. Optimus. I don't remember. Anyway. Pope Innocent X on the other side. They had carvings on this door that were so intricate. I could have spent an hour looking at that. But there's so much to see. Keep moving. So I took a picture. look at these frescoes. And these are built into the wall, and you know what I mean? So, just wild, you know? This is how they built it. This is how they built the whole museum. And they had these collections of really old antiquities, I think maybe even Etruscan, I don't remember. They had these random things. This was rebuilt, you know, the original piece was this much and they rebuilt it so that it would resemble what it used to look like, but look at the nice base they put it on. So cool. Look at that imagery. This one they also had to rebuild. You can see the new parts and the old parts merged together. So there was a section of time where they would do that with antiquities, and then sensibility changed. These are sarcophagi, and some of these sarcophaguses would be repurposed as fountains or flower beds. This is a famous statue because it represents Rome. I don't remember the whole story, but look at the gorgeousness of this statue. And this actually is the miniature of the one that's out in the courtyard of this same building. Even broken, you can see the artistry. Medusa. This is a Bernini, but a replica. I couldn't stop taking pictures. Right, left, and center was something to look at, you know? And above and below and behind and everywhere you looked. So within the museum was a little chapel, and this is the Holy Family. So I was reading up on this, and at that time they thought of Father Joseph as being older, and that the siblings of Jesus were from a previous relationship, so that's why the older father of Jesus and the young Mary. Oh, I don't remember the story now. Anyway. This was a saint and his story. So there's that statue I was telling you about. So on the other side, you had to go underneath the museum, and there's this underground section where they've unearthed antiquities, and this old, I think it was a temple, and you come out of the tunnel, so to speak, and on the other side of this is this view of the Roman Forum and the Palatine Hill. So that's why these pictures get thrown in with the others, because that's actually the view from the Capitoline Hill. So I overheard another tour guide talking about some of the buildings here. This was a triumphal arch that was built to celebrate one of the conquests, Roman conquests, and the actual forum, I don't remember exactly which one it is, but yeah, these would have been columns, and this was a temple. So this section was all antiquities. There was some tour guide talking all about this statue, and I didn't get the whole story. And this is one of a pair. Look how mischievous. And this is a famous statue of a fallen soldier. And his face is so different. And I forget the story, but he's not Roman. Look at this hair. So, and the mustache. I don't remember the whole story though. Look at the folds, you know what I mean? Just insane. And the way these pleats flatten over her thigh, like just so real. So you come out, and this is the exit to the second part, to the antiquities half of the museum, and there's this gigantic fountain with a huge statue of the water god. Now I'm trying to think why I can't. Poseidon, yeah? Anyway, what's his Roman name? I don't remember. So then this is the church next to. And I go in, and it's just gorgeous. Santa Maria di Arancelli. I think Arancelli meant gateway to heaven or something like that. Now I'm gonna be like, I'm recorded, and I'm gonna be like corrected. Yeah, I don't remember exactly. Look at this, you know what I mean? Every part of this is just way too much to look at. It's one of the reasons I was taking pictures, like I say. It's just, you can't even take it in. Every detail is something that you could spend a half an hour looking at. So that's the original icon, and this is this thing they built around it, and then they put it inside an arch, and then they decorated everything around the arch, and then there's these side rooms on either side. You know what I mean? It's like the baby Jesus, il bambino Gesù. And in the middle, underneath the dome, they always have this sort of like extra special section. I thought this was the funniest statue because here's Pope Leo just really plump, I thought, wow. One of the more realistic ones where they don't make him into like a Hercules or something. This was so ornate. I thought, how cool, you walk up these steps and the priest can talk to you from on high. How cool though, right? It's so ornate. And just gorgeous. So this is an old church as well, and used to be really important, and I forget the whole story, but as you see, it's just so decorated. And then on the sides, you're just walking over them. Some of these flagstones got picked up, and they would bury a pope or someone important under them and then put a marble over it. So you're just walking over it. And okay, so this is switching gears. So yeah, just endless things to look at. So this is interesting. So this was built and finished in 1911. So the scale of it is humongous, and that's an image of the whole thing. And here you are, right here, at the base. One of the things that blew me away is that's what it looks like. This was built to honor the death of the first king of a united Italy. And it's like, you only just had one king, and you're building this monument that's humongous. And they went ahead and did it. They had to tear down a whole ancient neighborhood that had been lived in forever. This is the Palatine Hill, so it's a very historic area. They had to tear down a few antiquities. They had to bring in all this marble, and they did it. They just did it. Like a total flex to modern Italy, just to show that we still got it. So on either side is this huge fountain. and then these huge statues. And I was just thinking to myself, my God, nothing in Rome is just sort of like, yeah, we'll just do a little, something. Everything's got to be like, you thought it should be that size, we'll make it 100 times that size. Like it's a Roman itch to impress and be like so over the top. Nobody could do better than us. So you get to the top and the statue is still higher than you, and that's that original. I think they called him an emperor, Emilio. Anyway, so this is the view from above, and you can see these antiquities across the way. Ancient ruins. There's the Colosseum in the distance. So the Palatine Hill. So this is the old church that I was telling you about earlier, and this is the new monument. And the new monument has nothing sacred about it. It's just a flex, just a dynastic show of power, which to me is shocking. So that night I had a poke bowl because I couldn't take all the cheese. That's the beginning. Yeah, now we're back to the beginning of the post. Yeah, so the scale that they build in Rome, they still can't help it. They got to keep going. Okay, so what was that? Day 6? Yeah, that was only day 6. My 5th full day in Rome. So, day 7, my birthday. So, I was originally scheduled to go to the Colosseum, but Baba organized it that got canceled too. So that got moved to later in the week. And so for day 7, I wanted to check out this food market. It has a lot of history, but it's also such a tourist trap. But so charming. And then I had to peek into a couple of churches, and then I went to the Castel Sant'Angelo, and that's a whole story. So I'm just saying, since antiquity, Romans have built to scale. Anything you can do, we can do 100 times bigger. Like, not just bigger, but it's got to be gigantimous. So I'll tell you about that in a second when we get to the picture. And then, yeah, all right. So this is just from the street, just looking at old buildings. Look at how they're just, integrated into, they still use them as offices and government offices, and some of them are private offices. And so this is the food market. Just had to take a couple of pictures. So touristy. But they have this whole system where they give you little tasters of everything, and next thing you know, you got to buy something, because everything tastes so good. And in retrospect, I know I spent too much. Even though I only had carry-ons, I still bought stuff there. I think this is just one of the churches. Oh yeah, okay, so this is the bridge going into Castel Sant'Angelo. So the middle section was a ruin. It was a mausoleum dedicated to Hadrian. So it's huge, huge. So back in ancient Rome, they built huge, And then they built on top of that. And then the Pope built a whole fortress, and he had this tunnel connecting the Vatican to here, so that this was his stronghold to escape any danger to Rome. And it was my birthday, so I took a selfie, and people comment, "Oh, I'm holding up an angel." It's like, yeah, I guess I am. So just wanted to show the hat that I'm wearing. This hat took me through 90-degree days in Rome, so so this is some of the outer fortifications. So the original monument was round, and it was a mausoleum, it was a tomb for Hadrian, and you could see the scale inside. And then they built a square fortress around that. So this is why out here looks so square, and then inside there are these gigantic tunnels, and it's round. Everything is ramped and round and goes up, 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 up in a spiral. And you look around and all these, they've been robbed of all their marble. This used to be, you can see all the pockmarks of all the metal that used to hold the stones together and then hold the marble on, and it's all been ripped off over time. But then later popes came along, and so there's some displays. Popes came along and built a whole castle. So this is just to show some of the architecture. You get to a spot where there's a little courtyard. And you go up these stairs to the right, and the view is insane. So this is from the top of the mausoleum part, and they call it the Patio of Angels. And that's the River Tiber. And like I said, that's part of the square castle built around the central part. And look at all their musket balls.
Did you say the Tiber River?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And part of the picture here is just showing these cool arches. So they built this all around the top of Hadrian's mausoleum. And they built these arches around it. It's so cool. So you look out and you see all this. So then they had this whole museum of ancient armaments. And I personally find that fascinating. So a lot of our history was fought hand to hand, and we all have some karma, battling each other to the death, face to face. So this is original frescoes. And then this doorway leads into the papal chambers where he would escape. And Roman style couldn't just be a place to escape, it had to be decorated. And you get a sense of it. So the whole building, as I mentioned, is round. So this doorway, look how thick it is. This doorway is built on an angle. It's kind of cool. And here you are. Can't just have, any old building. It's got to be decorated to the nines because it's a Pope's escape hatch. Even the floor was just gorgeous. So, gigantic fireplace. Yeah. Original frescoes. So this was a little room where they had like their treasury. You can see kind of like boxes of, and they stored some of the archives in there. Of course, their archives got too big for that, but if you kept going up, 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 there was more to see. And look at that ceiling, just gorgeous. And these pillars, they probably had stolen them from some other ancient ruin and brought them over here, so that happened a lot. You get to the top and there's the view. So one of the popes had this vision of, I forget if that was Saint Michael. Anyway, it was a saint. It was an angel. Came down in his vision and was sheathing a sword. And the Pope took that to mean that that was the end of a pestilence. I forget which plague. Anyway, I'm so enamored of the view up here that I have to take this video. Gotta walk around the people who are up there. And that was St. Peter's, I think. That's why I zoomed in. And there's the river. And And a nice tattoo. Just gorgeous up there. Oh yeah, so that's St. Peter's Basilica. Yeah. Just a view from above. This is an aqueduct, and they've rebuilt some of it. I don't think it was in use. I don't know why they rebuilt it. And back to, oh yeah, so I got chased out of this room, but this is kind of cool because this was some very ancient flintlock guns, pistols, and this is like one of the very first ones. I thought that was so cool. I got chased out of this room because they were doing some sort of documentary, and they said, oh, if you wait 15 minutes, but it was so hot, I just left. So, where is this? This was part of, oh yeah, so this is part of the papal quarters. This was like an audience hall, and it was so cool because, well, this guy was sitting in it, but they had these little alcoves where you could sit and look out the window, and it's kind of cool. And they had this roped off part of the floor. And this was showing the courtyard. Just because it was so neat. Cobbled up on the third or fourth floor or whatever. Yeah. I don't think I meant this to be a video, but it was just to show the fun arched hallway at the top there. So once you come out, you can actually go around the whole castle part. So this is looking from the outside at the part that we were just in before. And look how old the Hadrian's monument was. Like, how cool is that stone, right? All weathered, beaten with time. And built into and built on and built around and integrated into this castle that held all these turrets. It had all these, so this is an image of, so that's the original mausoleum, and then there's the papal chambers kind of at the top there, and then there's this whole castle built around it. And each one of these had like arrow holes and places to pour hot oil down on people coming at you. Little workshops. So then on my way home, I encounter this crazy building, and I look it up on Google, and it's the Ministry of Justice. So ornate. And this is just
Isn't this also called the typewriter building?
I don't remember that. So then I had to go all the way around it because it's so cool. This is the front. And it's just, oh God, the grandness, you know? It's just insane. That's the very front. Like, you go into a court date and you walk into this, yeah. Pretty wild. So there are these ruins just next to it, and I forget, these were baths, I think. So that's the round space, and yeah, they were still working on unearthing it. And then this is walking into another church, and I forget which church this is. But just any church you walk into, it's just like, oh my God. You just didn't know what to expect, but it would definitely be gorgeous. A different Pietà. Look at that. You just walk into any church, you know? So this is a picture of a mirror to show the ceiling, so that's why you can see part of me. I forgot the rest of me would show. And this is walking back. On the way back, there's just all these cool buildings and fun alleyways, and this is the food market again. Okay, I think we're back to the beginning of that. So, I think that was day 8, right? I'm scrolling down here because more to see. Okay, so part 2. So one of the things that happened as I'm leaving is I see this sign that says National Museum of Musical Instruments. That caught my eye, and I had to check it out. So lo and behold, it's next to an ancient ruin, you know. It's like, dude. So some of these are like, okay, whatever, you know, a collection of Asian instruments. Yeah, sure. Seen those things before. And then there's these cool little, like, flute kind of things, horns. So then I'm like, yeah, this is interesting, and I keep going. I think I spent an hour and a half in there. And there's more. And there's 3 floors of this. And some of this is more interesting than others, but I'll just kind of flip through. Look at this cool old horn. Little hurdy-gurdy kind of things. Harps. Look at this nice violin. And it carries on and on. And on. Some of it more interesting than others, but here's some here's where some of the, well, not quite yet, but some of the things that are really interesting are these harpsichords. So some of these have really old history. One of the things that's fun about these was some of them could actually be transposed. The keys could move over. This is really cool. So this is a triple harp, but totally decorated. Anyway, just gorgeous. The Barberini harp, it was decorated by sculptors. So an old harpsichord, look how gorgeous that is. And some of these keys could actually be moved over. Not this one. This one was interesting. It looked like it had a bellows to pump air, so it was more like a harmonium or something. And then this one had a little cutaway so you could see in. And look at how ornate that is. So I hadn't seen some of this sort of thing. So this was an upright harpsichord. Not harpsichord, spinet kind of, you know, an upright spinet kind of a. Yeah, so then they had small ones, like tabletop. So cool. And then this one was just so pretty. Had to take a picture. I couldn't stop taking pictures. It's like, how can you stop taking pictures? So this is one of those, I think, that could be moved to change key. You just move the keys over, you know, so it hit different strings. This one was a double layer. How cool is that? This was really fun. So this was a room with all these little pipe organs that were small enough to fit in the living room. And this one is just pint size. I'm like, oh my God, get yourself a little pipe organ that you can just put in the corner. Why not? So this picture, right? This picture here is actually that. Look how little it is. Get yourself a little miniature pipe organ. That's the height of luxury, man. But I do think that that's really interesting because that would have been miniaturized more and became like a harmonium, I guess, you know. Instead of pipes, it would be reeds and a harmonium. I love these shapes, you know. I guess they might have been gourds or something. I don't know. So, yeah, I had such a good time because it kept going. There was a section on like basses, but I didn't take a lot of pictures of those. They were too modern. But this is cool, like lutes that had like 1,000,000 strings. I hadn't seen that before. And like old oboe, kind of an original sax. You know what I mean? Like, how cool. Fun, fun, fun. So they did have little audio samplings of some of these instruments, but that would have taken me another 4 or 5 hours to listen to everything. But I thought this was so fun. Look at this instrument. So cool. Had to take a picture. So this apparently is one of the very, very first violins. And I was like, well, it doesn't look like much, but they had it in a special display. It was definitely babied, so it must be special. And there's some markings that show how old it is. So, okay, I'm impressed, but like, there was a lot to look at. So, I don't know one violin from another. But look at how many strings are on this one. How many strings are on that? So cool. Very, very fun. Yeah. That's like an old bass, one string. Funky lutes with long sides. This was, they called it a Pleyel piano. I guess it was a particular maker, but look how ornate. Just insane. It's just a piano. I love it. I just had to hang out there for a minute. That's just wild. Some sort of a really deep oboe type. Look at these funky shapes. So cool. So cool. So this was a little jukebox, so to speak. There were these round discs, and you pop it into this thing, I think down here or something like that, and it would play music. So one of the original recorded music players. There's some of the mechanism of how it would work. And then this one was one of the first jukeboxes where you put in a coin and it would play. And it had this was a menu of things it could play. There was 10 things on it or something. But it's fun because you could put a coin in and it would play. All right, so that was the Museum of Instruments. Fun, right? Okay. And if you're not tired yet, day 9 was a day trip to Pompeii. This is on the road. Look at that truck, huh? Had to take a picture. How cool is that? Buongiorno. Mount Vesuvius. And this is the first site of Pompeii under construction. And this was a big open space, and behind it was a theater, like an outdoor theater. So I had signed myself up for a bus trip from Rome, and it took us to Pompeii and Positano and then back. And that was the tour, you didn't have a choice. But they drop us off in Pompeii, and we have a guide. And this tour guide was hilarious. He was really he's done this before. And he had certain phrases that were really funny. Like, oh, don't get lost or we'll find you a mummified tourist next year. So, stuff like that. So then there's the outdoor theater. And then this was an indoor space, an opera house, and it would have had a roof, but the roof caved in, and it would have been roofed to have better acoustics, and the whole thing was smaller, and noblemen would have sat on the inside, and then everybody else would have had to bring a cushion and sit on the stones on the outer rings. But this was built as an indoor opera house, of which there are not many examples, but it was built different. So cool. So this would have been where regular folk lived. They would have had workshops downstairs, and then a second floor would have been wood, and of course the wood all rotted over time. But because those second floors were wood, they weren't allowed cooking fires over time, because they had fires in the city. And so there are all these examples of fast food restaurants. There would have been restaurants where they had food in clay pots. I'll show you some. So this is an original road, and you can see all the rutted cartwheel marks, whatever, ruts. And the carts could pass through here, and the people would be able to walk above whatever was in the street. Like if it rained or if it was sewage going down the road, people didn't have to walk across all that. They built these stones so that people could cross the street. So there were two main streets, an east-west and a north-south. And here is an example of one of these buffets. They called them a hot buffet. And they would there was a cooking kitchen on the side here, and they would put all this cooked food into these clay pots, which would keep it hot. And then people would come and buy their dinner. And there was like 65 of them found in Pompeii. So this is a nobleman's house, and you can see some of the original frescoes. And every house at that time had a cistern. There was a hole in the roof that was built to collect water and drop it into this cistern, and then that would go downstairs into a big catch pond for the water. Later, they did introduce aqueducts into Pompeii. So the interesting thing about Pompeii is that it used to be oceanfront. It used to be built right on the ocean, and it got buried under 30 feet of hot ash. So that's what killed people, was the hot ash. But because everything was buried, I mean, it's like the height of a whole tree. Like, it was buried in so much ash that preserved everything, frozen in time, in a way that other antiquities were not preserved, and ancient ruins, because a lot of times, where the regular people lived would not have been preserved. But, frescoes were saved and preserved. And the upstairs would have been slaves, because that would have been too hot for regular people, fancy people to live in. The fancy people, the nobles, lived downstairs, and they had bedrooms. They had individual bedrooms for every single person, and these are some of the bedrooms. Oh no, that's where the food was kept. Anyway, back at the beginning, these little rooms off the side would have been bedrooms, and they would have had one communal dining room. I think this was it. And then they had like a sitting room kind of a thing where they would have visitors. So this is some of the things they had on display. Street names would have been marked by an image. These street names that were added later were not part of the original. And this is some of the ruts made by carts. That's how busy the town was. And just room after room. So this was a bread oven, and they actually found preserved bread, because under 30 feet of ash, that would have stopped the cooking and given no oxygen, and they actually found ossified bread and that sort of thing. Pretty wild. And this is the other avenue, so the one was north-south, one was east-west. And, it was a 2-hour tour, but you hardly got to see everything. This is one of the baths that was preserved. There was the big bath in Pompeii, and you entered, and this ornate ceiling greeted you, and the men would have had their side and the women would have had their side, and this is the men's side. One of the things that's fun is that they had these little lockers, these cubbies, so people would come, bring their clothes, change, put their stuff here, and then enter. So this is one of the bathrooms. This was the tepid room, and then the hot room was over here. So they would heat water. So this was after the aqueduct was built. They built this bathhouse, and the water would be heated and passed under the floor. That's why all these tiles raised the floor, and underneath would be all hot from the steam, and that hot water would be poured into a bath over here. So that's where you would go first, was the hot bath, and then this is the steam room, and then you'd go back the way we came to the tepid room, and then there was a cold room. And I don't think I took a, this is the cold room, if I remember right. But look how big, you know? Oh no, this is back to the hot room and showing the tiles. And there was a pool. They actually had a pool built so that boys, could swim. And then this was an exercise yard. They did like various gymnastics and that sort of thing, wrestling. And this is some examples of piping that they found where they could bring water to different places. So once the aqueduct was built, they built these lead pipes that would bring it to people's houses. Look at this cool building. This is an old fountain. Some of the preserved mosaics on the floor. And this was a big temple. A big courtyard with temples all around. So that's what all the pillars were. And the original architecture would have had a second floor. So of course it's crumbled over time. But one of the things that's interesting about Pompeii is that it was buried under all this ash, which changed the sea level and made Pompeii not as important, because it used to be a port and it used to be built on this hill, which was very defendable, so it's obviously a great location. When the sea level changed, all the residents tried to come back and live there. They basically were out of a living because that's no longer a port. And basically Pompeii got forgotten for almost 1700 years. So there was someone who wanted to build a fancy house, and it's there. And when they started digging, they realized there was more underneath the ground than they thought, and that's when Pompeii was discovered. It was in like 1740 or something like that. So this is some of the museum, and this is on the way to Positano. So this is all near Naples, so that's the Naples Bay, and Vesuvius in the distance. And it's so cool. So this was just at an intersection. Somebody had built these, people had built this little thing into the side of the mountain. So this is a view from where basically the bus dropped us off, and we were to walk either up or down. And so they suggested to walk up first, and this is on the way down. I'm seeing these cool places that are just built into a mountaintop, and I think to myself, and of course there's a church. There's two churches I passed in Positano, little town on the ocean and on the Mediterranean, and of course it's just gorgeous inside. Of course. Every church is gorgeous. I was just really struck by how much that area over, since ancient times, how much that area really mastered stones. And this was the little bus stop, the truck stop that we all got out of the big bus from. And look at how it's carved out of the side of a mountain. And everything, oh yeah, gorgeous sky. Everything is just sort of like carved out of mountains, built out of those stones, repurposed from those stones, made into sculptures, like the mastery of stone, So that was my road trip. I did end up spending some money in Positano. It's like so touristy, and I still couldn't help it. It's just funny. So we're almost to the end. So this is my second to last day. Start out with a pastry. One of the things that happened was I would take a bite and be like, oh, so yummy, and take a picture. So that's why it's bitten into. This was made with pistachio cream. Very yummy. So this was Colosseum Day, and on the way, I'm taking pictures along the bus ride. and there's the Colosseum. Now, the thing about the Colosseum is that any angle and any point of view is totally photogenic. Like you can't take a bad picture of the Colosseum. But that day, besides being super hot, I wanted to see the hill as well. And although I could have seen it the next day would have been really, really crowded because it would have been a free Sunday. So once a month they have a free day for almost all the museums. So I thought to kind of cut the Colosseum a little short and do the hill. So I didn't spend a great deal of time inside the Colosseum. There are wildcats everywhere in Rome, and it's to the point where there are cats on all the touristy items. It's like a meme of Rome. And there was some wedding pictures going on. And this is across the hill, across the way, the Palatine Hill, some of the ruins up there. I don't even know what everything is. There was some signs, and a lot of it was just sort of self-explore. Definitely quieter. This was an interior courtyard all the way to the back and around. This was just a garden, and it was something where, you know, important families could stroll. But what really struck me was they sometimes would take a chariot. Imagine you have a garden so big that you have to take a chariot to go around it. So more ruins. And the Palatine Hill had been very ancient. Like there was very old temples and such. There was a little neighborhood, so to speak, that was very old, and then they built on it and around it with Roman Empire times. So noblemen and emperors would have built up there. I think that Nero built his palace up there. So this is a view from the very top. So there's a lot of different sort of ages, but all antiquity. Some of these are incredibly huge, of course, because they would have been emperors' palaces. And then this was later. This was built on top of ruins, and that was one of the Pope's vineyards, and that's a view of the Colosseum from the top of the hill. And a view of the cobblestone, the basalt stone, the triumphal arch that we'd seen earlier. Various views. It's so much to look at and so much to know about. If I had been more informed, if I had a tour guide or a book or something, I would have had more information. But in any case, it's all exciting. And there's this big amphitheater, and they were actually rehearsing for a big concert. Look at that cool door. This was a chapel, I think, that was built later out of a temple. And this also was like an ancient temple that they Christianized. And on the way out, everyone puts their tour guide stickers. You know, when they do a tour guide, when you do a tour, you get a sticker or something, you know. And I just thought it was a fun visual image, all the little stickers. Yeah, so even walking out, you could see more along the street of the ruins. So I was taking more pictures, even though I'd exited the gates. And this is all from the street. So this was kind of fun because this building was really cool. And then I see around it is this old fire department, and I got to see a fire truck go in. So that was close to a tram stop. And this is just a picture of the Tiber River at sunset. There was a cool band playing. So I happened to cross this bridge, and I realized that I'd seen this on Facebook, that there's this place where, on my side of the river, where people gather, and they gather every night and they dance or whatever. And that night was some sort of a magic act. So I'm trying to get in and see it, and I couldn't really get a good view. So I wandered into one of the alleyways and found myself some dinner, and it was yummy. More pasta. And I thought that was really funny. Don't worry, be happy. And of course, more church. Had to peek in, because I could. And it's gorgeous. Just everywhere you look. Rome was just so full of art and antiquities and cool buildings and monuments. This is on the bus ride home. And that was the beginning of the day. So I think that's everything. Do I have one more? I don't remember if I took any pictures on the last day. The last day, oh yeah, just a little bit. The last day was just wandering. I just had a wrap-up day, and I didn't have a lot of plans, so I thought I'd check out this thrift store, and I walked there because I could, because there was no big plans for the day. And on the way, this was a park. Look at all these statues, just in a nice old park, and then part of the Roman walls. And then I thought, oh look, interesting, American University of Rome. Wouldn't that be fun to take art history in Rome? And this was the thrift store. And I don't know if stuff was on consignment, but they had real paintings. They had like incredible antiques. Of course, I couldn't buy any of this stuff, but I was taking pictures, just having fun. And kind of cool. Look at all the stuff they have for sale. So I was kind of curious, what do people have in their homes? And that's what a thrift store would give you an idea of, right? And there was all sorts of random stuff. It was fun. Little miniature books. Fun collection. Buy yourself an icon. I sat down for a minute, and there was this whole display of old chandeliers. So this is walking back. Lots of stairs, because this is the hill that's behind the neighborhood I was in. And it's the Janiculum Hill, they call it. One of the 7 hills of Rome. And look at these old walls, just built into new structures. Gelato, of course. And that's all my pictures. We made it. I got home.
Wow.
Took some pictures. Made myself some sourdough French toast the next day. And there we go.
Next time you can show us some of the things you bought.
Oh, so I just bought small things. I bought some truffle oil, like real truffles in oil. I bought a little bit of vinegar because, they give you all these tasters and you're like, okay, I'll buy one of these. I bought some cheese, which didn't make it very well. I mean, it's edible, but because of the heat, it was losing cheese grease. So kind of messy. What else did I buy? I bought some books because I figured I couldn't take pictures of all the paintings. Somehow We skipped a day. There was one day that I rented an e-bike. I joined a tour where it was an e-bike tour of the aqueducts. I think we skipped the pictures that day. Oh well. I think you're all tired. But it was so fun. And on that day, they dropped us
What's
off.
an e-bike?
What's an e-bike?
Oh, excuse me. What? Yeah.
So an e-bike is a bike that has a little
Yeah.
motor on it. It has a motor on it. So when you pedal, it gives you an assist. So it's really easy to go up hills and go
Yeah.
fast.
Oh,
It's fun.
wow.
Really fun. So that ended up being a 6-hour day.
Oh,
And one of the stops was the catacombs.
Oh my.
And they didn't allow photography, so there wasn't exactly a lot of photographs from that day anyway, but so interesting. So at a certain point, Rome being not Christian, Christians being of the wrong religion, they had to bury their dead outside of the city. And that was the
Oh,
time that they were still being martyred, right? So they built special arched sections for martyrs, and then their whole family would be buried in that little grotto. And it's fascinating because the volcanic soil of that area is such that you could dig into it and it's like clay. It would hold structure, but you
oh,
could still dig. And it has a low or high pH. Anyway, it has a pH such that when you then put a body in that hole that you dug, you stuff it back full of that soil and you put a marble thing in front, it wouldn't smell. It was part of the pH of the soil. Very interesting. So you could build structures in it. You could dig it. You could move it around, but it would hold its structure. So fascinating. So yeah, Saint Cecilia was buried there and then moved, and yeah, so that's part of the Cecilia story. Anyway, that was a long tour of Rome. And when I got back, I got to Baba's house and I gave it all to Baba, and I really felt like I personally gave my whole trip to Baba, but I felt like I gave all of Rome to Baba. You know, like that whole Catholic history and the whole, like, all of that
I don't think he wanted it.
intensity. Well, he received it from me because, he had no choice. It's yours.
So
So,
good that he's
yeah,
thinking now.
very interesting trip. And like I say, I wasn't specifically going for like an overtly Baba reason,
Mm.
but I do feel like it was still totally Baba guided. Where I went and how I went and what I was supposed to do was totally just his direction. Yeah. So thanks for listening. You guys have been very patient.
It
Good
makes
thing it
me
was recorded,
grateful
right?
that he's so much simpler now. Makes me
What
very,
is?
makes me grateful that Baba's emphasizes simplicity. He's so much simpler.
So much. And you know
So
what?
much.
I really
Mm.
don't feel spiritually enlivened by a space that busy.
Mm.
So it wasn't that for me, but it was definitely visually
Uh,
interesting as an artist. So yeah, wasn't necessarily a pilgrimage for me, but it was obviously a place of pilgrimage for many, 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 many people for many thousands of years and still is. Someone
Baba,
was like, "Go hear this Pope speak," and I was like, I don't need to hear the Pope speak. It's okay." Besides which, you would have been in a crowd of like thousands of people in the heat, and you see the Pope this tiny up on the second floor. Yeah, it's like, you know what? I'm okay.
yeah, he's an American. He's a first ever
I mean, I
American
think
to
he's
be the
from
cool.
Pope.
Chicago. From
I think
Chicago.
he's
Yeah.
cool.
He's from my
yeah,
hometown.
yeah, that's
I
Baba
so.
also
saw.
visited Rome. Eh? Baba also visited Rome and the Vatican,
Oh yes,
the Forum Romanum and the Pantheon.
did he
Many
Pompey?
places in Rome. Yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah,
on
I don't
Baba.
doubt it. I don't doubt it.
Did you stay in a hotel, the same hotel the
It
whole time?
was a VRBO, and yeah, I stayed in it the whole time. It was a cool apartment in an old building. It
Uh-huh.
was cool because the ceilings were really tall, and every doorway had an arch or part of an arch, like, it had
Uh-huh.
been carved into a building. So I guess, within that building, it had been subdivided into apartments. So the fella who was renting had put in air conditioning, so there was that, but it was kind of nice because the mornings would be kind of cool and I could just turn everything off and open the windows, and there was
Wow.
a kind of courtyard. They have, it's a common European thing. It's not common here, but instead of a screen, they had these louvered doors, they're about that thick, you know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
and the louvers are angled. And interestingly, I would have some fruit out and no fruit flies. And the air was dry, You couldn't do this in Myrtle because it's too humid. The humidity would have killed you. But you can
Wow.
do that even in the heat of Rome because the latitude is really the same latitude as New York. Much drier, even though it's hot, hot, hot. Yeah, it was a fun place to stay because, you kind of see what uh, a local would live like. The kitchen was like what a local would have, and it's fun to rent an apartment, have that as a home base.
So to remind everybody, this was the birthday party for Leo's. Leo birthdays this month,
Oh, but the party will
th-
be
That's next week.
next week.
next week. Yeah. Well, that's fun.
Yeah, Diana.
Yeah.
Yeah, Angela, I so enjoyed some of these photos. I mean, there was so much to see, but
Oh yeah.
there were a few photos, especially at the beginning, but then later on, where you're looking down a narrow street and you're definitely in the middle of the street, and it's this perfect, like, art, um, maybe art teacher's demonstration of perspective because you've got
The lines all meeting in one spot.
Yeah, yeah.
something down in the middle, and
Yeah.
it was just so much fun to see. And I love the feeling in those photos. It was really, really fun.
Yeah, I wanted to capture some of what I was seeing because I wanted to remember it one day, but then,
But
Do you
just
know
the
what on your
perspective.
on your
yeah,
phone
all the perspective, right? All the perspective lines coming in.
when you look at your photos in photo, there's a little thing that has like an eye on it, and
Uh-huh.
if you tap on that, it tells you where the photo
It
is
can
and gives you the
tell you
description.
more about it,
You want to be
yeah.
on video?
Yeah, so
And I
you could
use that
use that.
function, but I just didn't spend a lot of time
Well,
doing
there's
that
too
with
much
every
to
photo.
see. There's too much to see
It
to
was
record all
overwhelming,
that.
and yeah, each
Yeah, you
thing would
couldn't
have
do
taken
that.
a half an hour. So yeah, I
You would have
spent
We
a
were
long
only
time.
in
you'd have
Rome
been in front of
once.
one statue
Oh,
for the whole day.
Absolutely,
Yeah, no, you did
just
a good job. That
gorgeous.
was great. Thank you.
As an artist, you
thank
know what I
you for
mean?
the tour, Angela.
Oh, I'm so glad you came with me because it's a lot, and
So grateful for you to
oh,
doing it for us. Oh,
I
Came
felt
the
like
first time on Facebook, and now I'm coming the second time here.
and you
Actually,
get a
the
little
first
bit more of
time
the story
we
around it,
took,
right? So,
yeah, we took Hannah to Rome when she was a little girl.
oh,
So
nice.
now we got to see it more currently. It's nice. Thank you.
Yay, I'm glad that you joined me for this.
good idea. I'm glad you thought to
Popped
share.
myself on the
Yeah.
calendar, and here we go.
I
Yay,
really
thanks
love
for
that baths building,
joining me.
that building where the baths were.
Oh,
Just amazing, so huge. And
imagine.
that lifestyle, but it's just what I guess for those who had the money.
Yes.
No, I checked. I went to Chat GPT. Everybody bathed daily. I
It
mean,
was open to the public.
yeah.
Oh,
Uh-huh.
really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, what
But
a thing.
I mean, obviously not the slaves, you know what I mean? But it would have been
Really.
a place where it was like a town gathering. Like everybody did their business
communal.
there. They're wheeling and
Like
dealing there.
you'd all sit in the bath together and chat, kind of like
And massage was part of it. That was sort of,
A
isn't that
lot
nice?
of a lot of the the process was hot and cold.
Yeah.
In this tour, I forgot, there must have been another day that I missed. Anyway, I also signed myself up for what they termed a modern Roman bath. And basically, it's a spa, but it was so fun. Yeah, we skipped the pictures of it. Anyway, I did have some pictures. They had you sit in this tub, and that was hot water. And then you had the whole place to yourself, right? So I could go in and out of the tub, and then they would have like a shower and a toilet, a shower that I could do a cold shower, and then there was a steam room. And basically, the
Wow.
plan was you go between all those three, and that's actually pretty much what the Roman baths were like, just on a large scale. You would have a hot bath, you would have a steam room, you would have a tepid bath, and then you would have a cold bath, and you kind of go between the rooms, and you spend an hour doing that, and you feel pretty relaxed.
I would
Pretty. Yeah.
the
Yeah.
skin and to get the toxins out of the body.
Totally,
Maybe.
you sweat it all out,
Yeah,
and then you cool off, and you do it again.
yeah.
And
You
actually,
certainly
even though
did
it
a
was
lot of
hot,
walking.
oh God, I did so much walking.
Yeah,
And
and
in that heat, it really felt
yeah.
like, 3 hours, like, okay, that's it. That's all you can do. It was a lot of walking,
Yeah, you survived that.
just doing that.
I was thinking, why didn't you come over to visit to Belgium because it's like only 30 euros flight or
Oh.
something like that. But then I was thinking, oh, we had the heat wave at the time, so I didn't have two bedrooms because one bedroom was an oven.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Would
And
y'all
like if I had nothing but time, I would have done way more of Europe. But you know how it is. Like Rome
Yeah.
itself was just so engrossing. I thought, I'll keep it loose and maybe I'll do a day trip here and there. But like every city in Italy has that quality of like you could spend a year
You
and
can
still
go
have
back.
something new to see.
Yes. I've been there 3 times and still I haven't seen anything.
Yeah, there's still things on my list, and I'm like, I can't do anymore. So too bad.
Yeah.
There's all these museums, and there's all these palazzos of popes, and there's all these churches to walk into, and there's all these, you know what I mean? Just
Yeah, all
endless.
these villages and cities and beautiful.
Yeah, neighboring cities, and then going to like Florence would be a whole
Yeah.
4 months, and then Naples and Venice, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that Europe generally has that quality, but Italy, interesting. Interesting to me. I feel like Italy was never high on my list of like culturally aware things to do as a kid. I felt like France was, and England, you had to go to England, and you had to go to Ireland. But like Italy is really coming into its fore now, I feel, somehow. Something about its karma. It's really much more present in our conscious culture.
The food. My goodness. Yeah, the
The
great.
food was fun,
the
but
Romans go way back? Like
Romans go way back.
a couple of what's that lady's name who was a Briton who fought the Romans? She had an arm. The Romans betrayed her family. Like I think it was more than further back than, or maybe like 1000 BC. Her name was started with a B, and they killed her husband and children, or they betrayed anyway. Her husband, or either her husband or her father, tried to befriend the Romans, who were actually kind of the rulers or the militant. They could do what they wanted to in Britannia,
Oh, sure.
And
Their empire extended that far, yeah.
her father had the notion that as long as he made them feel welcome and went out of his way to please them, that they would be safe. Otherwise, people got wiped out,
Sure.
and that didn't work. Once he died, or something happened, and they ended up in a fight, and most of her family was killed, and raped and killed. And uh,
Boudica?
there's a movie, and I don't know that I've seen the movie. I heard it as a documentary presentation on, I think it was BBC or NPR one night a few years ago, and I have forgotten a great part
Well,
of
the
it. But
Roman Empire was humongous at its height, and
that woman accumulated a huge army
mm,
and fought them, and she defeated them down till the a last battle, and she wasn't smart enough, a tactical person, and foolishly applied her battle tactics and was defeated. Got most of her army of about 100,000 strong were killed off because because the Romans were smarter.
Was her name Boudica?
Boudica. Yeah.
Boudica, you're right. Kind of like
oh,
like the Buddha. Yeah, Boudica. That
Mm.
was it. Yes, that's the name.
there's so much history, and Rome was continuously occupied for what is it, 4 or 5 thousand years, maybe more.
Is
I
it
don't know.
that long? Yeah. Recently, I was watching a YouTube thinking about Adobe and study and finding stuff, and I got off this track on presentations about concrete and
Mm-hmm.
the ancient stone they made,
Roman
like
concrete is
as we
famous.
use concrete in the old days in Rome and around Europe and Asia,
Yeah,
and their methods, their buildings, they say, are still standing after
right.
1,000 years or more. And they say our concrete buildings, like, I guess we're talking, I don't know what the Empire State Building's made out of, or is it 100 years old? I'm not sure. But our buildings are not holding up as well. And they said mostly because of something regarding porosity and the tolerance of moisture, the way that moisture is.
Yeah. The Romans had a
Uh,
formula for concrete that apparently we've lost, which boggles my mind.
yeah,
How do we lose that technology?
yeah. These YouTubes got into that pretty cool. I mean, yeah, I thought it sounded scientifically sound to me.
Yeah, yeah. It's
So,
very
for it,
fascinating.
barely. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, the ancient Romans,
I
they
don't
knew how to
know,
build,
but
man. And then they would build on top of and then around and borrow this and bring it over there, and they definitely
if they're
they
making
knew how to
their
build.
building blocks out of that, what the
Travertine.
volcanic,
Yeah.
yeah, with all that volcanic being acidic, if you say it's lower in pH,
I forget if it
that
was
would
low or
make,
high.
yeah,
I think it was
that sort of
actually
fights off
a high pH.
bacteria, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
High pH, well, it depends on numbers.
I think it
Some
was
say,
alkaline.
yeah.
I think it was alkaline. It is alkaline.
Alkaline.
I
Oh, well,
think it's
alkaline
alkaline.
usually favors the development of
Not if it's
bacteria.
high enough, it kills it too.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Fascinating. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. You really
Yeah,
stuck
thank
it
you,
out.
Michelle. You
It
have
was a
done
very
justice.
intense trip.
Oh, I guess so. Been an intense couple hours. Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining. I really had a great time, and I'm so happy to be back. All right.
Okay. Hey, bye.
Avatar,
Very
Meher Baba
valuable.
Ki
That's a
Jai.
wonderful presentation. What I heard of it. Yeah.